You've felt this before, and if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit it now. You were there, present, attentive, available. He responded quickly. He adjusted his schedule. He made a point of showing interest. And yet, things started to cool down. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't for lack of affection. It wasn't another man, at least not at the beginning. It was silent. Change in tone. Less enthusiasm. Less commitment. And the worst part is, you didn't understand why. Because in your mind, you were doing everything right. And that's exactly where the mistake lies. There is a silent behavior that doesn't seem wrong. It doesn't sound toxic. It's not aggressive. It's not disrespectful. On the contrary, he seems mature. It seems like genuine interest. It seems safe. But little by little, he kills something invisible. The tension, desire, the feeling of emotional risk. When you're always available, something changes inside her. Not consciously, not rational. It's instinctive. The female brain doesn't just respond to what you say. He reacts to what you represent. And when you start revolving your life around her, even without realizing it, your own image begins to shrink. Not because you show interest, but why do you stop setting boundaries? There is a huge difference between choosing someone and needing that person to feel validated. When you always respond at the same pace, when you are always ready, when you never fail, when you're never absent, you eliminate the doubt. And without a doubt, there is no emotional tension. Without tension, desire goes into automatic mode. And the automatic mode doesn't scare anyone away from losing. The problem isn't whether she feels safe. It's about her feeling in control, because control generates comfort. Excessive comfort breeds inattention. You start to become predictable. Predictability does not trigger deep emotion. It stabilizes, it accommodates. You'll become a guaranteed presence. And everything that is guaranteed ceases to be valued at the same level. It's not about games. It's not about coldness. It's not about feigning disinterest. It's about what happens when your life starts to revolve around hers, and not the other way around. Without realizing it, you are giving away something very powerful: your time, your priority, your energy. And when this happens too early or out of balance, something inside her understands a silent message. He'll be here no matter what. And no one fears losing what they feel they already control. Perhaps you've already experienced this. Perhaps I am living now. Perhaps I haven't yet given a name to what's happening. But if something inside started to make sense, if you've ever experienced that feeling of doing everything right and yet feeling distant, so pay attention, because what really changes this dynamic isn't what you say. It's a simple behavior that you haven't noticed yet, and that's exactly what comes next. If you continue doing exactly what you've always done, the result won't change. You can even change the person's name, the story, the context, but the feeling will repeat itself, because attraction doesn't respond to intention. She responds to the decision, and the decision begins the moment you realize you can no longer negotiate your boundaries in order to be accepted. When you understand that change isn't about moving away, it's about taking a stand. Perhaps this is the point at which you stop reacting automatically, and it begins to act consciously. If that touched something inside you, you know. Some changes don't need to be said out loud, but they can be marked. A simple gesture, a sign, a silent commitment to who you are becoming. And when you choose to follow this type of content, it's not about me. It's about remembering every time the kind of man you decided to build. There's a subtle moment when everything changes, even if no one says anything. It's when you stop shaping your routine around someone else's availability and silently begin to respect your own life. Not as a strategy, but as an internal decision. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you don't threaten to leave. You simply continue being who you were before putting someone else at the center of your life. And that creates something rare: emotional space. When you keep your life active, something reorganizes itself in the dynamics. You don't cancel appointments to prove interest. You don't abandon plans to avoid conflict. You don't chase after answers as if silence were a problem to be solved. You live. And that life continues to exist even when it's not there. This changes how you are perceived. Desire is born where there is movement, where there is choice. When you don't beg for attention, you stop communicating neediness. When you don't adjust everything to fit her, you show that your life has its own weight, and weight generates respect, not by imposition, by contrast. She begins to feel something difficult to explain, a slight tension, a doubt that didn't exist before. You're not distant, but you're also not available on demand. You appear fully present when you are. But when you're not, the world doesn't stop. This activates a sense of emotional scarcity, not because you disappear, but because you don't offer yourself excessively. There's a profound difference between wanting to be with someone and needing to be. When you need to, you negotiate boundaries. When you want to, you choose, and choices create perceived value. Female behavior responds to this instinctively. It's not calculation, it's feeling. She senses that you have options, direction, an internal center. At this point, something silent happens. She starts wondering where you are, not out of anxiety, but out of interest. She begins to assess her own behavior, to realize that if she's not careful, something might slip away. The fear of losing something doesn't stem from a threat. It stems from autonomy. You don't do this to provoke. You do it because your life demands your presence. Your goals don't ask for permission. Your routine doesn't revolve around external validation. And when that becomes clear, even without words, the dynamic shifts. Perhaps you've already felt this shift at some point in your life, or perhaps you've never allowed it to fully happen. Because keeping your life active requires courage. It requires accepting that you won't always be an immediate priority. But it also requires realizing that deep attraction doesn't come from constant effort, but from balance. It's in this interval that you stop over-explaining and begin to be felt. You don't justify your absence. You don't apologize for living. You don't try to convince anyone of your worth. It is observed, perceived in the details, in the tranquility of your posture, in the absence of haste, in the fact that you don't react to every emotional variation. This stability creates curiosity. It creates contrast with past experiences, and contrast is one of the greatest amplifiers of desire, because where there is difference, there is attention. And where there is sustained attention, the connection deepens without visible effort, simply through the way you occupy your own space. Without announcements, without promises, without urgency, just silent consistency that communicates inner security and awakens something she feels before fully understanding it now. If this resonates with you, you know. Some changes begin with an internal shift in focus, and sometimes marking that point helps. Perhaps writing something simple like, "I choose my center," or "My life comes first," is a way to declare, even if only to yourself, that something has changed here. There's a very fine line between maintaining your autonomy and seeming cold. And most men make that mistake, because when they discover they need to distance themselves a little, they do it abruptly, artificially, almost as an emotional punishment. And that doesn't create attraction. It creates noise. It creates insecurity. It creates rejection. The detail that changes everything isn't how often you show up or disappear. It's how present you are when you choose to be. Presence isn't about quantity of time. It's about emotional quality. When you're with her, you're fully present. No cell phone as an escape. No anxiety for validation. No need to prove anything. You listen. You observe. You respond calmly. Your body is there. Your attention is too. This creates real connection. And true connection doesn't depend on excess, it depends on depth. The problem begins when a man tries to compensate for his own absence by being demanding. Messages that are too long, questions disguised as concern, subtle attempts at emotional control. That's when independence turns into distance, and distance, when it comes loaded with insecurity, is quickly perceived. When you're away, the focus returns to your life, not as an act, as a real priority. Work, training, friends, silence, rest. You don't disappear to provoke. You simply don't revolve around her expectations, and that communicates something powerful, even without words. You trust the bond enough not to monitor it. This trust creates space, and space is where desire breathes. Secure communication stems from this. You don't over-explain. You don't defend yourself against accusations you haven't made. You don't react to every emotional fluctuation as if it were a threat. You maintain a calm tone. Present. Available when it makes sense. Absent when your life demands it, without guilt. Female behavior responds to this balance in an almost inevitable way, because it breaks patterns. She's used to men who either cling too much or distance themselves as a game. When you do neither, you stand out. You become a different experience, and different experiences spark continuous attention. The fear of losing you doesn't stem from the game. It doesn't stem from manipulation. It doesn't stem from calculated coldness. It stems from the silent certainty that you don't need to beg to stay, that you choose to stay, and that this choice can change if respect is lost. This creates a specific kind of tension. It's not anxiety, it's perceived value. She feels that being with you is a constructed privilege, not an automatic guarantee. And that changes how she positions herself, how she invests, how she cares. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to announce that you've changed. Your behavior speaks volumes. Your calm consistency speaks volumes. Your absence of demands speaks volumes. Your complete presence speaks volumes. Perhaps you're realizing now that it's not about doing less. It's about doing better. Better presence, better choices, better emotional posture. That's what separates attraction from rejection. Not the trick, the axis. And this shift doesn't happen from the outside in. It begins the moment you decide that your life is not a bargaining chip for affection, that you can connect deeply without abandoning yourself, that you can desire without depending. If this makes sense, maybe it's time to mark this point. Not for me, for you. Sometimes writing something simple like presence with focus or I choose calmly is enough to symbolize this internal change. And from here, what comes next isn't about doing more. It's about sustaining what few manage to do,